Section 4 of Neighbourhood, A Year's Life in and About an English Village by Tickner Edwards. Read by Peter Yearsley. February, Part 1. 1. From where my old house stands, behind its double row of lindens at the top of the green, you can see well nigh all that is happening in Windlecombe. Sitting at the writing table in the great bay window, you get an uninterrupted view down the length of the village street, from the windows right and left, through a trellis of bare branches in winter, and in summer through gaps in the greenery. You overlook the side alleys where dwell the less profoundly respectable, the more free and easy of Windlecombe folk. And in the rear, beyond my garden and little orchard, there is the farm, rickyard and barn and dwelling house, all crowded together on the green hillside bestrewn with grazing cattle, cocks and hens innumerable, all of the snow-white breed, gobbling turkeys and guinea fowl that cry, "Come back, come back," every waking moment of their lives. All the oldest houses in Windlecombe are gathered round the village green. Here, amidst its thicket of live oak and yew, the church tower rears its bluff grey stones against the sky, its clock face with the one gilded hour hand (minutes are of no account in Windlecombe) turned to catch the last light of evening. The parsonage, the village shop, the forge and wheelwright's yard, a dozen or more of ivy-smothered tenements, stand at easy intervals round the oblong of the green. There is the little sweetstuff shop at the far corner, side by side with the cobbler's den, and beyond them the inn juts boldly out half across the roadway, silhouetting its sign against the distant bright patch of river which flows at the foot of the hill. I often wonder how other villages get on without a green. In Windlecombe all the life of the place seems to culminate here. On summer evenings everyone drifts this way at some time or other, for a quiet stroll, or a chat with friends on the seats under the Seven Sisters, a group of gnarled Scotch pines almost in the centre of the green. Even in winter I seldom look forth and see it entirely deserted. Except in school hours there are always children playing upon it, and the old men, whose work in the fields is done, hold here daily a sort of informal club whenever the sun shines. But the old women I never see. All their lives long their activities and interests have been centred in the home, and now they spend the dusk of their days consistently by the firesides. On weekdays the fairest summer weather has no power to tempt them abroad. Up to 70 or so they can be seen creeping over the green towards the church on Sunday mornings, but it is duty, not desire, that has drawn them from their burrows. For the rest of the week they sit, most of them, stitching tiny scraps of silk and cotton together. It seems to be an indispensable condition of future bliss with all the old women in Sussex that each should finish a patchwork quilt before she dies. There comes a morning in the year, generally in early February, when the fact that the days are getting longer is suddenly driven in upon your consciousness, as though the change had come about in a single night at the touch of some magician's wand. A long spell of gloomy weather ends in a crisp, bright dawn. Through the chinks in the blind the sun casts quivering spots of gold upon the wall. You wake from your dreams and immediately know that life has become a different thing from that of yesterday. Throwing the casements back, there comes in upon you a flood of new light, new air, new melody. It is barely 8 o'clock, and already the sun is high over Windle Hill. The thrushes have given up their winter piping, and have begun to sing in the old glad way, linking half a dozen sweet notes in a phrase together, and pouring it out over and over again. The air has the savour of warm earth in it, the scent of green growth, and looking down at the flower borders in the garden, you see sheaves of snowdrops breaking up through the soil, and the first crocuses yielding their treasure to the first bees. Today, though it was only the 1st of February, just such another morning startled me from sleep and sent me out of doors, tingling to the fingertips with this new spirit of wonder at a changed order of things. Over Windlecombe, in the level sunlight, 100 violet plumes of smoke rose into the calm air. From the smithy came the steady chime of Tom Clemmer's anvil. The pit saw was droning in the wheelwright's yard. Up at High Barn they were threshing wheat, and the sound might have been that from a great cathedral organ so far off that nothing but the deep tones of the pedal pipes could reach the ear. But though all these sounds denoted humanity astir and busy at the day's task, to the eye there was no sign of anyone abroad. I was as much alone as Crusoe on his island, and just as free to wander where I would. I skirted the green and turned in at the churchyard gate. Everywhere between the crowding stones the grass was white with dew. Glittering water bells rimmed each leaf, and trembled at the tip of every twig. The old yew dripped solemnly in its shadowed corner. Down the face of each memorial stone tiny runnels coursed like tears. It was strange to see how the dewdrops obliterated all vestige of natural colour in the grass, and yet lent it 1,000 alien hues. As I moved slowly along, sparks of vivid green and crimson, orange and blue flashed incessantly amidst the frosted silver. Turning my back to the sunshine, all these colours vanished, and the glittering quality of the dew was lost. Now it was just a dead white field, crossed and recrossed with lines of emerald where the foraging birds had left their tracks. But all round the head of my shadow, that stretched giant-like before me, there was still a shining circle of light. I remembered to have read somewhere of one of the religious painters in the Middle Age who accounted himself divinely set apart from his fellows by reason of a halo, which, he said, appeared at certain seasons about him as he walked in the fields. Probably he saw then what I saw this morning, but being an artist, he won inspiration, new freshets of saintly energy, from what, to the ordinary unemotional sinner, would be no more than an interesting natural fact. Part 2. Towards afternoon, quite a little throng of ancient folk gathered on the benches under the Seven Sisters, drawn thither by the sunny mildness of the day. Sauntering about on the green hard by, I could hear the low hum of their voices, and at last I took a place, almost unobserved, on one of the outer seats, a little distance from the group. Eavesdropping, even in its most innocent form, hardly comes into the category of virtues, but in any serious attempt to study country life and character, it must be reckoned almost a necessary vice. I confess in this respect not only to having yielded to it as a lifelong irresistible habit, but to having cultivated it on many occasions as an art. The English peasant, under open observation, is no more himself than a wild bird in a cage. And these old folk in particular needed as much wary stalking down as any creature of the woodland. Settled myself quietly now behind a newspaper in the corner, my presence, if it had been marked at all, was soon forgotten, and the talk began again among the group in the usual desultory pondering style, talk in the ancient dialect of Sussex, such as you will hear to-day only in the most out-of-the-way villages, and then only among those with whose passing it also must pass irrevocably away. Daniel Dray, the old wheelwright, was tapping his stick reflectively on his boot-toe, keeping time with the song of the pit-saw in the neighbouring yard where young Daniel was mightily at work. By his side sat Tom Clemmer the elder, his bleak grey eyes far away in space. All the rest of the company were studying the horizon in much the same distraught, silent fashion. A very old but still hearty man, in a wide blue suit, was chipping at a plug of sailor's tobacco with a jackknife, and smiling to himself. At length the smile developed into a rich chuckle. "Dan'l," said he, "now you spoke a true word, if never afore. So they be, Dan'l, so they be. Aye, and all around the world 'tis the same wi' 'em. Don't I know?" He made a telling pause at the question, and then, "Not half," he added in solemn irony, as he struck a match on his hindermost serge. The old wheelwright stretched himself luxuriously in the sunshine. "I knows noan o' Frenchies and blackamoors and sich like," said he, "but a Sussex maid, ah!" The exclamation, long drawn out, was echoed round the circle. Old Tom Clemmer turned argumentatively in his seat. "Aye, real purty, Dan'l, purty enough," he agreed. "You were in luck's way, as I minds well were said by all the folk, forbye 'tis so long ago. But, fegs, man, we hadn't all your fortune i' bright eyes. What says Master Grimble there?" A thin, high voice quavered out from the end of the bench. For full 5 minutes it hovered in mid-air, like a long drawn-out treble note on a violin. "Aye, true, Tom. Never a word o' a lee, Tom. But 'twere nane o' my doing, as many's the time I had told you. Stavisham Fair 'twere, i' '53 as I first seed her, all in sky blue and spangles, with the lights flaring, and the drooms busting, and the trumpets blowing, and such a crowd o' gay folk as never got together afore in the world. Wunk I did at me, and I wunk back. Then wunk again, and 'twere all o'er, neighbours. We got church balled the follering Sunday, and home I fetched her, all within the month. And then, Tom, you knowed how it fell out. 6 week go it we had together, and then off I goos after us all carawan again, and I goos for a soldier, and nane but the girt goodness knows whether I be married man or widow man to-day." The faint, shrill voice ceased. A lean old man with a chubby face and eyes of so pale a blue that they seemed almost colourless in the rich yellow light of the afternoon had been intently listening, a trembling hand to each ear. He wore a spotless white round frock, and was punctiliously, unnaturally clean in all other respects. Now he brought his fingertips softly together and stared at the sky in an ecstasy of reminiscence. 18,000 happy days," said he triumphantly. "Again 6 weeks o' rough and tumble. Poor George! Ah, well a day. But 'tis so, neighbours. The Reverend figured it out for Jane and me last catterning time. 18,000 gone. But I should ha' lost 'em all if she hadn't up and spoke out. I ne'er had no thought on't, true as the sun goes round the sky. But Jane give me a red neckerchief one hot Monday. Thinks I, what's that for? And then give me a bag o' peanuts, and says I to mysel', 'tis a queer maid, surely ye. And then comes along at harvest time, and says she, 'Henry Dawes, I had just heard how old Mistress Fanny 'll gie up the Malthouse Cottage at Millamus, and seeing as how you wants me and I wants you, 'twould be a pity to lose it, so let's get ousted in church directly minute,' says she. With that I put both arms around the red neckerchief as I wore, and gimme 1, 2, 3 each chop, and one i' the middle. Lord bless you, I knowed then what I meant, I did. I were allers the sort as could see through a brick wall far as most folk. Never wanted no more than int." "There again," said old Tom Clemmer after a pause. "You were another of the lucky ones, Henry. The best of women plunked straight into your eye, in a manner of speaking. Ah, but courting days weren't all peanuts and red handkerchiefs with some of us, Henry. Dear, oh Lord, what trouble I did have, surely." He stopped and sat for a while, smiling down into the bowl of his pipe and shaking his head. "But you got her at last, Tom," said Daniel Dray softly. He stole a commiserate glance round at the other members of the company, and had a silent, meaning nod from each. Old Tom Clemmer blushed, then laughed outright. "True, Dan'l, and well I recommembers the day as I first come to Windlecombe, up to the farmhouse yonder, though 'tis 40 year ago. All a heap I were, soon as I sot eyes on her. Churn maid, says I to myself, 'twon't be long afore you're summat better than that, down at the forge cottage long o' me. Come Sunday, I runs again her on the Lytton path. Mornin', Mary, says I, and gives her the marigolds I'd picked for her out of my own gay ground, and down I throws them in the mud, and off without so much as a word or look. Ah, a proud fine maid o' her, to be sure and all." Tom Clemmer knocked out his pipe upon his crutch. Then he threw an exultant glance about him. What might a man do then, you'd think? Well, as marigolds weren't no good, I tries laylocks. Not a bit on it. Geraniums? Wuss and worse. Roses? Never so much as a sniff. Summat useful, thinks I. But they little spring onions as I tied up in a bunch with yaller ribbon and hung on the dairy gate for her, there they hung till they was yaller too. Then I has a grand idee. Off I goes to Stavisham and buys a girt big amber brooch, and a silver necklace what weighed down my pocket carrying of it, and a spanglorious golden wedding ring. Now, my gal, we'll just see, says I, all the way home. I bides quiet till Sunday, then I hides ahint the girt elver tree, and pops out upon a sudden like, as her comes along. I offers her the brooch. "Get out of my way," says she. "'Tis just a common halfpenny fairing." "No, 'tis amber, 'tis real pretty," I says, and brings up stock still. Then out comes the necklace, and down went her good book, slap in the dirt. "Oh, 'tis kind o' you, blacksmith," says she, catching hold on it. "Ah, but what thinks you o' this here?" says I. "But I won't give it ye yet a while, 'cause 'tis unlucky for a maid to have the ring afore the day. Lor, what eyes they had, surely." I thought a bit, then says she, "Thomas Clemmer, how much ha' you got laid by?" And soon as I told her, says she, "I'll ha' you, Tom, darling, for I never loved none but you." Ah, well, well, most unaccountable 'tis, how the very words comes back to you arter years and years. He fell into a brown study, out of which he presently came with a jerk. 4 o'clock? Never! Gorm, how high the sun be! I must be getting home along. He rose upon his one serviceable foot, fitted the other foot, a shapeless bundle of linen, into the sling that hung from his neck, seized his crutches, and stumped placidly away. There was a direct path from the Seven Sisters across the green to Tom Clemmer's cottage, but he always came and went by the roundabout route through the churchyard, for the excellent but frugal-minded Mrs. Clemmer had lain there under a home-made iron cross and a carefully tended bed of marigolds these 20 years back. End of section 4.
Please subscribe to update new videos. Please share and like if you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much.